What is up everyone, it's Justin here, and today I've got the full comparison for you between the HTC One M8 and the Google Nexus 5. I know a lot of people are going to say that the Nexus 5 is quite a few months older than the HTC One, and that is obviously true. However, once a new one comes out later this year, I will be comparing that once again to the HTC One M8. These two phones definitely share a lot of similarities, but also have their own differences. They fit in different parts of the market. The Nexus 5 is a phone that definitely has top-end specs, but fits in at a mid-range budget price, while the HTC M8 comes in at a flagship price for the flagship phone. So the first category we're going to cover is the hardware. The HTC One was well known for its all aluminum construction, and they have once again repeated that in the M8, this time going with a brushed metal texture, which I definitely think looks very nice. As opposed to the Nexus 5, you've got a nice smooth back. At the same time, it still feels great in the hand, and in my opinion, it is actually pretty durable. But where the difference really lies is how every time you pick up the HTC One, you have the feeling of a premium phone, while the Nexus 5, like I just mentioned, still feels amazing in the hand, a very seamless phone. You really just don't get that premium feel that you would from the HTC. Both phones also have on-screen buttons. Both of these phones are also available in 16 and 32GB configurations. However, on the HTC, you have a micro SD card slot expandable up to 128GB. Moving on to the display, the HTC One has a 1920 by 1080 resolution 5-inch display with a PPI of 441, as opposed to the Nexus 5's 4.95-inch display that is also in full HD resolution at a 445 PPI. From looking at the displays, I think that they both look amazing, there's no doubt about that, but I kind of felt like the HTC One was just so much bigger, probably because of the smaller buttons and the smaller icons compared to the Nexus 5. Moving on to the phone, both of these phones have Android 4.4 KitKat, with the M8 running on the HTC Sense 6 user interface. However, if you're a fan of the M8's hardware but prefer the unskinned stock Android experience on the Nexus 5, there is a Google Play edition going to be available for the M8. First, let's take a look at the HTC One, and here we're taking a look at the blink feed, which is something that HTC has really wanted to encourage over the past few years. It is pretty much like Flipboard on your home screen towards the left of it, kind of the same place where Google Now is located on the Nexus 5. But from my first impressions, the phone itself functions amazingly, and I'm actually a really big fan of HTC Sense 6 compared to the HTC Sense 5 seen on the previous generation. You can also take a look at all your recent running apps under the cards and close them all at once, in fact, and it is also very easy to still access Google Now by holding on the home button and sliding up, and it takes you right to it from anywhere you are. Where I find there's the biggest similarity in the software is the notification tab. I'm actually a really big fan of it. A very clean interface, and you have your quick toggle settings on the next window. You can also edit those and change what you want and don't want on that menu. So that is actually very convenient, and there was just a look at your settings. With Sense 6, they've also added a few things such as the knock function, or that's not really what they call it, but it's exactly the same as the knock function from LG. You can also swipe up to go to your lock screen and swipe left to go straight to blink feed while your phone is in sleep. Giving you a quick look of the camera application, it actually looks pretty simple. I really like the flat look in Sense 6. Same with the icons, you will notice that throughout, but we're going to go more in depth into the camera app when we actually compare the cameras. On the Nexus 5, you've got your unskinned stock Android experience, which a lot of people definitely prefer because it was just so much snappier. Everything operates very well. It is powered by a Snapdragon 800 processor at 2.3 GHz as well, and 2GB of RAM. And instead of blink feed, swiping to your left will take you straight to Google Now, which I actually use quite a bit, more often than I thought. But there's just your recent running apps. Unfortunately, you will have to swipe each one to get rid of them, and you've also got quick access to Google Now from anywhere by holding on your home button. So there are a few features that you can see are similar from the M8 to this. Again, like I mentioned, the quick toggles and also the notification tab is extremely similar between both of these phones. I actually really like it. And you can see here there's all your settings, a nice flat look to it, and it's actually kept very simple, and it really comes down to personal preference visually which one you will like more. But the one thing that really bugs me about the Nexus 5 is how big the icons are and how big those buttons are. It just kind of makes the screen feel a little bit smaller. Also, taking a quick look at the camera application, you just need to hold on the screen anywhere and it will take you through all the options. In my opinion, it is a little bit finicky, but I think a lot of people do actually like it. And there is also a few modes here, the video mode, panorama, and also photosphere. So both of them have worked amazingly. The Nexus 5 was actually my favorite Android phone before the M8 arrived. So like I said, you do have the option to get stock Android on the HTC M8 if you purchase the Google Play Edition. So that's always a great option. So cameras are a very important part of smartphones these days. It is something that people are increasingly going to use as they keep getting better and better each year. And although both companies have taken different approaches towards the camera, it's going to be very interesting to see how they stack up. The HTC One has a 5 ultra pixel camera. Yes, it is only 5 megapixels, however it does feature larger pixels within the sensor, allowing each one to capture more light to get better low light performance. You also have the dual flash and also that weird looking secondary camera on the top that is used to capture depth information, allowing you to focus after you take the image. The Nexus 5, being a midline budget phone, has a midline camera. At 8 megapixels, it takes some decent images, but let's see how it stacks up with the HTC M8. I also forgot to mention that the front-facing camera is 1.3 megapixels. So taking a look at the camera app, you can see that it is very simple and pretty plain, which is a good thing in a way. All you gotta do is hold on anywhere on the screen and you've got your settings that you can quickly access, I guess. You can also switch the modes very easily between the video, photo, panoramic, and also photosphere, which I've seen people who are pretty good at using it and it looks amazing. Going into the gallery now, you also have some options in terms of the editing, so let's just take a picture there and tap it. Personally, I don't use the gallery a lot when I have my Android phones around, so looking at it, you have some options to add filters. A lot of people will just do this in Instagram, but they're there if you need it. Some of them look okay. You can also add your own presets and even edit stuff like the vignette, the black and white, the exposure, and all that stuff. So it allows you to be pretty creative all within your phone without using an external app. However, there are tons of apps out in the Google Play Store that also allow you to do similar things. On the HTC One, you can see that they have also opted for a rather simple interface, but at the same time, for people who would like to change stuff like your ISO, your white balance, you're also able to do that and even set it as a preset. Here's just your menu to switch between the modes. I'm actually a pretty big fan of the rounded icons, nice flat look to it. There's a dual camera that allows you to record from the front and the back facing camera at the same time. And they have also made it very easy for you to switch from the front and the back facing camera by just swiping by the edge of the screen, whether it is from the top or bottom. So now we're going to take a picture and go into the gallery, and there you can see they give you quite a few options, a lot of which do utilize the secondary depth information camera, such as U-focus, foregrounder, seasons. Here's just a look at the foregrounder, and what that does is, again, utilizes the depth information to see which objects are closer or further away and add different effects to it. Here we're just going to play around with the U-focus, which is the tap to refocus. And just tapping on the background, there you can see the blinds do go into focus. In general, it does work pretty well under optimal conditions. And another thing that is very fun to play with is the 3D effect, which gives you different lines of perspective. And you've also got your additional effects, crop, and tools such as that you can also utilize. So taking a look at some side-by-side images here between the HTC One and the Google Nexus 5, I would say that both of them do take some pretty sharp images. On the HTC One, you have more of a flatter look to the images, and on the Google Nexus 5, you kind of have a bit more vibrance and contrast. However, if you did know, the Nexus 5 upon first release did have quite a bit of complaints about the camera. However, in a software optimization update, they definitely fixed it, and the images were noticeably more vibrant and more contrast added to them. So I feel that it is highly possible that HTC may follow up with an update that may optimize the camera on the M8 just a little bit to brighten up some of the colors, as there has been some initial complaints about the camera quality. So now taking a look at some low light images, you can see that the HTC One definitely does a good job. Although there is a window there, the room itself was pretty dark at the time, and it decided to do this test without the built-in flash just to see how these cameras can handle it without needing additional light. And this is where the HTC One's ultra pixel camera really started to shine, giving you more of a smoother tone but also better sharpness in lower light situations. Taking a look at the front-facing camera, on the HTC One you have a 5 megapixel one, on the Nexus 5 you've got a 1.3 megapixel one. Of course these images had to be cropped down to fit the screen here, but in full size you'll definitely notice a difference in the sharpness. But in terms of the colors, once again the HTC One does seem much flatter. So taking a look at the video test, I did not do any touch focusing while I was recording video. I wanted to see how the cameras would be able to autofocus within the video test, both of which do shoot in full HD 1080p. Some people may have been a bit surprised that the HTC One did not shoot 4K video or didn't have a mode for that. But here you can see as we move closer to the objects, we can see how these phones are able to focus into them and adjust to the lighting as we move around. The color tone seems a little bit different between both of these phones, but I think it really comes down to the personal preference as to which one you believe looks better. Perhaps one of the most impressive features on the HTC One is the boom sound speakers, which sound amazing and are perhaps the best speakers on a smartphone out in the market. On the other hand, going back to the kind of mid-range price, the Nexus 5 doesn't exactly have great speakers at all. So let's just compare them both just to give you guys an idea. When you compare the battery life of these two phones, the HTC One has a 2600 mAh battery, while the Nexus 5 has one that comes in at 2300 mAh. So not a significant difference there, but definitely a little bit of a difference that you will notice. Of all the phones that I have reviewed, the Nexus 5 was the one that had the best standby battery, and in general it performs very well. I was able to get easily 7 hours or so on a given day, and on the HTC One, although I haven't had that many days with it, on my first day I was able to get about 8 hours and still have some charge left. And it is also said that the Snapdragon 801 processor is slightly more power saving than the Snapdragon 800 processor. However, despite some initial complaints of the Nexus 5's battery, in my experiences it has worked very well and the HTC One can easily get through a day, which is always great to see. But now let's go ahead and check out the benchmarks, and I have to expect that the score is going to be very close between these, as the 801 processor versus the 800 processor really doesn't have a drastic difference at all. The first test I ran was Geekbench. You could see that the single core score of the HTC One was 922 versus a 916, while the multi-core score surprisingly on the Nexus 5 with the Snapdragon 800 processor came out about 200 on top. Moving on, the HTC One came up with a score of 28,774 in the Antutu benchmarks as opposed to 26,572 on the Nexus 5. Now we're going to test out the GPU and graphics handling of these devices using 3D Mark and the Ice Storm Unlimited test. On the HTC One we got a score of 20,856 and on the Nexus 5 we've got a score of 13,373. However, even with these scores, the differences won't really reflect on a huge difference, as both these devices have top-end specs and are able to handle graphics and the games currently on the market just fine. And the last test I ran on both these devices was SunSpider, which is a JavaScript browser test to test the browser performance on both of these devices. The HTC One came out with a score of 851.4, and the Nexus 5 came out with a score of 874.2, which is extremely close when you look at those numbers. Both of them were ran on Chrome. So now on to my final verdict. I'm going to start out by saying that the Nexus 5 is a phone you really can't go wrong with, especially for its midline price tag. It features a 5-inch Full HD display and also top-end specs with its Snapdragon 800 processor. However, it goes without saying that it is not perfect. And the same goes for the HTC One. The Nexus 5 in fact was my favorite Android phone prior to the release of the HTC One, and its new build quality and feel of the phone paired with the Sense UI, which I'm actually a pretty big fan of, has pretty much won me over. However, for stock Android fans out there, you could still get the same experience on the HTC One, as the Google Play Edition is now up for pre-order. But aside from that, I hope this video assisted you in your buying decision, and leave a comment down below as to which one you would pick. I'll see you all in the next video.